Hey guys, welcome to the Tetra Health and Performance Podcast. Tackling a cool topic today, tackling fat loss and the mechanisms behind it, what takeaways we can use to get a bit more success with our journey with it.
Yeah, we with fat loss, we kind of called it fat loss purposely. Like we hear a lot of people say weight loss, but the aim of fat loss and the reason we've called it fat loss is because the aim is to really drop body fat while maintaining or in some cases increasing muscle mass. And I think quite often even the idea and the language of saying weight loss kind of destroys the point of what we're trying to do because weight is also not what we're aiming for too much. Well, weight might be a trackable, the word weight, I think, gets people too caught up with having to track their weight when really what we're doing is we're trying to get a body composition change. And just to start off with talking about fat a little bit is fat is not all bad. It has an important role in the body. It heats us. Yeah, it stops heat from getting to or change of temperature to organs. It cushions the organs, which is extremely important. It has a role in the hormonal systems. Yep, and it has many other bioactive factors. So it has many other roles in the human body. Also, we have different types of fat in the body. We have white fat, which is normally what we discuss as what we want to lose. And then we have these beige brown fats, which are actually have a completely different purpose in a sense, where the white fat is fat that we take for energy and it's stored there for energy in the future. Well, brown fat and beige fat is around the body. It's used to actually regulate our temperature. And a little bit about men and women. Well, women hold about 10% more fat than men on their body just naturally. There could be many reasons for why that would be. We suspect that it's for breastfeeding later on in life and just taking care of children. And then women naturally hold more 10% more than men, and men actually have normally about, so with that, men can go as low as 5%. Yep, well, women normally can't go lower than 15% before then things that I just mentioned start getting bothered. Like, so hormones change a little bit, like things start going wrong.
Even fun to think about how we evolved and where it came from. Like fat used to be quite an advantageous thing, and now it's been demonized in more modern society, where we would once a day would find food, would find resource, would eat the hell out of it, smash it down range, and would need that fat just in case the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months were hard. Would have that extra energy on store to kind of use and feed. And now that we've evolved and we're like, well, screw fat, get rid of fat, we have this more aesthetically driven society. It's now a bit of a harder issue to tackle now when we once served a great purpose from an evolutionary byproduct.
Yeah, well, we actually haven't evolved technically. Well, we have the exact same want to hold on to fat, store it for later on, but our environment has changed. And because our environment has changed, what's actually happened is it doesn't meet our kind of evolution and where we are at this point, where we want to store food. We want to get as much food as we can most of the time. And therefore, things like supermarkets, stuff like that, really high fatty foods, really high like sugary foods can actually be so like something that we crave often, and kind of like it's our evolution and our environment working against us sadly, and something we've mentioned a few times, and it's really predominant in the world today until they can figure out exactly how to kind of switch off that storing fat gene, which I'm sure will be sometime in the future. Then this is kind of the case that we have to deal with. We have to go through fat loss.
Yeah, to keep going on that, like calories are cheap and easy to find these days. It's not this scarce rarity that we have to go hunting or find down. You go to the market with a couple of gold coins in your pocket, and you can come out with a couple of thousand calories easily. So it's not this problem that exists anymore. It's abundant. It's easily accessible. We see like this too, where the lowest social economical individuals generally have the highest level of body fat because calories are scarce. Calories are abundant, and we do not need much resources to access them. It's actually the exact opposite. You'll find like as you earn probably more, you have more access to a few dollars, and we can actually buy some healthier food, which is more expensive. It's kind of crazy how ingrained it is with society to actually be abundant with easy, cheap calories that have low nutritional content.
Yeah, exactly. And your body will want nutritional content. They want what we call these micronutrients. And the more food you eat with low micronutrients, the more you're going to crave food until you can get these micronutrients in your body, or just vitamins and minerals as the micronutrients. But Mitch mentioned then just calories, and calories is an interesting one as well, as calories is a measurement, and it's the best measurement we kind of have to look at energy as food. And it's really just that 1 calorie is the energy it takes to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. And that's kind of where we work with food as much as possible, because our body needs to heat itself, and because the way they test it is they put it in a pool of water and kind of like heat it up and then they measure the temperature of the water. That's the best we have. When calories aren't an exact science still, like most things, it's not an exact science, but it's the best we have. And
Mm.
because we want that kind of data tracking, we want to be evidence based. It's the best we have at this minute. I'm not to say there won't be something better in the future for actually tracking.
Beautiful thing about science, mate. We'll keep learning, keep developing, and hopefully find some more innovative systems to get more accuracy behind this. Cool. So fat loss, like what's going on? What are the driving forces behind it? So kind of two things in play. We've got what's called your fractal synthetic rate of fat tissue.
Kind of how
Thank
the
you.
body, and when we eat food, how the body then converts that food into fat that then gets stored. Well, obviously, when we eat sugars, fats, sometimes proteins, but very rarely. Only if fat and carbohydrates are the best sort of source of energy. Carbohydrates first. Well, sometimes what you're going to find is you're going to find that actually these, when they are in excess at the moment, then get stored for later in fat cells. And the idea is we have that, as Mitch mentioned, we have that kind of that synthetic rate of of storing of fat, but in reverse, we have the breakdown of fat as well. So we have this, what's called fractional breakdown rate, and that's the ability for the body to break the fat down and then utilize it as energy. Well, for that to happen, you do need to be in some kind of calorie deficit most of the time. It's actually happening all the time, right? Even though we're going to get a big, so let's go back a second. Let's just say that for us to actually lose fat, we need the breakdown of fat to be higher than the storage of fat. Therefore, we need to be in a calorie deficit. So the number one rule of fat loss is that we need a calorie deficit.
So FBR over FSR at all, like pretty much at all times to kind of be driving that calorie deficit and shifting that body fat to slowly drop. But what are the drivers of each one? So pretty much when we want to get that FBR, that breakdown of fat tissue up, that's like getting the metabolism to be quite active, having your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, like just moving more. That's like walking around at home, doing the dishes, doing the gardening, just non-planned exercise. More of that helps get happening. Intentional exercise, like actually going to the gym, training, playing tennis, any planned movement that's going to burn more calories through the day. And high qualities of sleep and good recovery is going to help that out as well as lowering stress where applicable, where applicable.
And then to this, the sleep and the stress levels, so they kind of coincide with each other. The idea of getting better sleep is going to control your hormones. So you're going to have less stress hormones. You're going to have more of them kind of good anabolic hormones. So the idea is to be like, well, actually in a calorie deficit, we actually want to be a fair bit catabolic, but we want to hold on to as much muscle as possible. And stress is the worst thing for that. So a good quality night's sleep is going to be extremely important in helping our stress levels and also not getting stressed as much as possible. Easily said than done, but life happens.
Right. Shameless plug. Just did a sleep podcast a couple episodes back. Check that out to how to improve that. But honestly, like that low hanging fruit of sleep, right? How impactful it is to actually fat loss like journey. So getting that habit under control and improving that is massive to how it affects us with our decisions and our mechanisms of our body. The other effort is besides that FSR. We already kind of touched on that, and the only main factor we can do with that is just lower our caloric intake. So as James said earlier, it's been in a deficit, and we'll talk about what that means and how to do that in a moment. But again, just having that lightly lower intake, that's how we're going to help lower that. So we're lowering that FSR and we're increasing that FBR to try and burn some calories.
Yep, and yeah, and next up is goals of fat loss. So this is really important. Like, what is your goal? So if you are listening to this podcast with like, hey, well, that is my goal. That's something I've been trying to succeed with for a long time, or actually, like I could do with actually dropping some body fat. Well, what is your goal, and why do you want to lose fat on your body? Well, obviously, one big reason is health reasons. Well, we know that actually when we store too much fat, actually eventually fat starts getting stored on our organs. More fat gets stored on our organs, and this can have health implications. Hence, why quite often, if you are overweight, considered overweight by a doctor, then they will recommend some sort of fat loss diet. Other things is just lifestyle improvements. Like when again, same thing is because that fat has these influences on hormones, it's going to have influence on things like energy levels as well. So like just lifestyle improvements. I want to have more energy. Well, if you are carrying excess fat, well, this is going to be a perfect way to achieve that, right? Self-image. Well, this is a big one. This is one that we probably deal with the most. But self-image is going to be a really a big driver of people wanting to lose fat. Well, maybe you want to get your beach body, maybe you want to look better naked. Well, losing fat is normally going to be kind of the prescription for that.
And this is one of the key distinctions when it comes into self-image and kind of wanting to feel like you look better, and that's a personal thing. But this is where fat loss and weight loss has a big distinction. There's losing body weight, like the intention to get skinny, if you will. And fat loss is kind of like keeping as much muscle as possible, if not having more muscle and dropping body fat at the same time. And generally when someone comes to us and says they want to lose weight, 9 times out of 10, you've got to ask 1 or 2 questions, but they want fat loss. They want to have a bit more muscle and reduce that body fat and have that more recomposition as their main target of their nutritional journey and their strength training journey. So just knowing what you want is key, and fat loss 9 times out of 10 is what the individual is after.
Yeah, and we look at muscle mass. Well, you want to have muscle mass on your body for as long as possible in your life. So I think it's not a good endeavor to actually want to lose muscle mass at any stage in life, because at some stage in your life you're going to try and hold on to it for your dear life. It's going to want to come off your body, and we kind of look at like the health benefits. Like your life expectancy can be tied in to the amount of muscle mass you have on your body. So if you want to live longer, then you want to hold on to as much muscle as possible while you lose fat. And just quickly with that, like we can actually talk about kind of one of the issues with people continuously dieting, trying to lose weight, and actually what they end up doing is losing so much muscle mass that this is actually going to be like a yo-yo over time, because it's going to drop their metabolic rate, and it's going to be harder for them to lose fat over time. But we'll touch on that a little bit more later. I think we'll just quickly touch on the benefits of fat loss as well. Like, so we've had the goals. Well, the benefits, obviously some of the goals and benefits will tie in, but there'll be things that you may not even expect.
Oh, you want to get better at running? First thing, like just sprinting, long distance endurance or sprinting, reduce body fat. Like you don't have to do any run drills. You don't have to do anything specific outside of that. Just reduce body fat. I swear to God, you get faster. You'll be a faster runner. You'll find it easier.
100%. Not just running, like any relative strength exercise. And relative strength is just like your body weight to your strength ratio. And the idea is, if I want to get better at chin-ups, well, that's an easy fix to get better at chin-ups. Could be that I just drop some body fat. I want to keep that muscle mass on because I want to be strong still. I don't want to lose my strength with that. Push-ups. Like so many people want to get good at push-ups. Well, that could be an easy way to do it. You could actually just drop some body fat.
You want to be more explosive. You want to jump higher. Reduce body fat.
Yeah,
less body weight to try and move, and you got the same amount of muscle mass, and you can move more of your body weight with less holding your back. Amazing, right? So healthier too. We quickly talked about like what doctors recommend. Like every doctor, like if you get some poor blood results, 9 times out of 10 they're going to say you need to reduce body fat if like you have excessive amounts, right? So like blood work will improve like almost instantly by ripping off a few kilos. All right, so blood work, we're getting healthier, we're getting better blood work, we're performing better. We're looking more aesthetic. We have greater relative strength. We can move our body faster with speed work and endurance work. God, am I missing anything here? There's a few benefits here.
That's pretty good. I think on a side note as well, is like most illnesses these days are what we call metabolic conditions. And actually with them, they're actually more modern day than ever before. So that's why the doctor's going to recommend it to you, because they are normally lifestyle issues. So whether or not a pursuit of losing fat could be amazing for some people, and it might not be the best for others. But you'll find that these metabolic conditions can be reversed or delayed, depending on that kind of process, that kind of thought process.
And I understand this is we'll try and simplify it through the chat today, but this is going to be crazy. There's so much mixed information out there. There's people that talk in extremes, that you have to eat only this food, you have to exclude this food, and you have to stand on your head, you have to swim underwater, all sorts of crazy claims. But pretty much there's a lot of BS out there. And really what we're going to try and talk about is not demonizing any said type of food or any macronutrient, or not talking in extremes, just talking a bit what the science says and kind of the proven benefits that we've seen with our experiences.
Yeah, and I think a quick one off that is kind of looking at, for example, people's belief systems when it comes to losing fat. And we just kind of explained one with the weight loss, fat loss thing, but also what people have been told in the past. I think there's I still to this day have someone come in every now and then and go, oh, I just need to turn this fat into muscle. And goes, well, sadly, the process isn't that simple. We've actually got to lose fat and increase muscle, and they're two separate processes. And that's why it's kind of hard to do them both together. And when we're looking at, like Mitch said, we're looking at macros and not limiting things from our diet, we'll find so many diets out there where people do things like limit carbohydrates or they limit fats. But you'll find that adherence is not normally the number one rule. Have a plan, make sure it's adherable for yourself. And if I limit something like carbohydrates, do you think adherence is going to be easy? Well, I'm going to walk past the cake shop, I'm going to see a cake, and I'm going to want them carbs really, really hard. If I am limiting myself from too much fat, then I'm going to walk past I don't know, a baguette, a slab of butter, and I'm going to want that, right? And this is going to impede your adherence because you want that food so much because you're limiting it in your body. Well, so what we want to do is when we set up a plan, we kind of set up it so you have all three of them things. And which mentioned there, micronutrients as well. Well, if I'm limiting things like fat, well, I'm going to limit fat-soluble vitamins. If I'm limiting things like carbs, I'm going to limit really good things for my gut and my digestion, like these fibers. If I'm limiting protein, which I don't think many people do, but they do this accidentally, well, I'm going to limit all the amino acids, all the building blocks of my body, right? So I think it's extremely important that you don't actually fall for these kind of limiting diets unless told otherwise. They can be good for certain people. And as we've discussed, and we'll discuss more the kind of nutrition period later on, where the most important thing is calorie in and calorie out. And these diets don't work. They're not magic bullets, right? Then they don't work for the reason that you normally think they do, because you're having these long fasting periods in intermittent fasting, or because you're cutting carbohydrates and they are the devil, or because you're cutting fat because that's the devil. They work because you're in a calorie deficit. They work because you are eating less food than you are expending in energy. Therefore, that energy has to come from the fat that you already have in your body, and that's how it works.
That's what they all share in common. No matter what it is, the Atkins diet, bloody demon. What I got Atkins. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Like you look at that. Look at Atkins, and I'm off the top of my head. Atkins and keto are the same thing, just different time. Like they're 10 years apart from each other. The Atkins, don't eat sugar. Keto, don't eat sugar. Like they got different names, but the same thing. You got intermittent fasting, which is just like
blocking out a period of no eating, so you only have a limited window to get calories in,
and that can be fine, right? But what's going to happen in the middle of that window? You're going to get hungry, and it's going to be hard to adhere to your diet. Some people it works well, and I think mostly it doesn't.
And I don't want to go off topic, but everything we just said there is limiting caloric intake. That's all it does. It's putting you in a deficit. It's the only way the body will lose fat. And there's good ethical ways to do this. And like what James said, like macronutrients play a vital role to how we feel and perform as human beings. And each one, protein, fats, and carbs, has a role to play in the body. It's helping us with internal stuff and external things. If we cut away carbs, it's going to be hard to have mental focus. If we cut away fats, we're going to take away from hormonal function in the body. If we're taking away from protein, it's going to be hard to keep that muscle in the frame and a lot of other important aspects. So to keep all those macros in play is integral when we're looking at food.
That's why we like to have an evidence-based approach, right? We're trying to give you as many things as possible to get you the adherence you want, which will lead you down to get the best results possible. As you may find that something like the keto diet will work for you for 3-4 weeks, but are you going to get the results you want in 3 to 4 weeks before you all of a sudden have a cheat meal and you just give up? No, you won't. So it might work for the first 3 or 4 weeks, but is it something that you can adhere to for long periods of time? Okay, and we'll get into that now. Like when we talk long periods of time, we talk what we call periodization, but simply just having a plan. And we'll kind of discuss the plan now. Like, what do you want to have as the plan first?
All right, so we could talk plan with nutrition and plan with training. These are like 2 elements of it. So we'll talk nutrition first, and we'll talk training second. So first, building a plan is you got to kind of know a little bit of the background of what you need to do. So obviously you know what you want to weigh, what direction you want to go with. Put a plan to what you're currently doing. What are you eating? What are you consuming? Writing this down and knowing what you're actually doing. No changes yet. Just do what you're doing normally and see what your average consumption is. And we can do that for 3 to 4 days, 5-6 days, and create a standardized average of what you're consuming. And there's heaps of tracking apps that can kind of do this. There's like MyFitnessPal, which is a free app. And you can just don't change anything. Just plug away what's currently going on and see what you're consuming. And before we make any meaningful changes, we understand what we're intaking. Not looking at macros, just simple a caloric intake for the day. If we want to make a change, that's what we're going to be basing our changes off when we understand what we're actually consuming currently.
Cool, and that's called our basal metabolic rate, and that's the amount of energy that we need just to survive in life. There is an interesting way to kind of work that out, and it's kind of you times your body weight in kilos by 22. And then while that's not an exact way of doing it, it is a cool way that you can do it nice and quickly and you can get an idea. But you can, again, like Mitch said, you can use like, there's tons of apps and calculators, macro calculators online. And then once you've worked out your metabolic rate, like how much energy I need just to live, you've got to add on to that. So then you want to add on that, you want to add and that'll be in calories, by the way, as a measurement. Then you want to add on your NEAT. So that's your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So that's kind of like the amount of stuff you do throughout the day that isn't training and is added on top of your just the energy you need to survive. And then once you've got that number, and the NEAT's an interesting one, right? Because you'd be surprised how every steps can be a really good way of building up NEAT. Actually, the easiest way to build up NEAT. If you have an active job, like me and Mitch have really active jobs, we're pretty lucky like that. Well, if you walk your dog, if you do the house chores, house duties, if like washing your car, all these things that will increase your NEAT. And then on top of NEAT, we have it's EAT, so it's your exercise activity thermogenesis. So this is actually exercise that you've planned, and this will be going to the gym. It could be like you count 1 hour of training, and then you kind of be like, oh, was it intense? Was it moderate? Was it reasonably easy? And then there's good calculators for that as well that you can use. And once you've got that number, then you can it's a good starting place to then kind of be like, okay, well, that is the amount of calories that I expend in a day. So now I need to have a deficit. Yep.
That's a beautiful place to start with. And just a quick one too, like some accuracy is better than no accuracy at all. So having some tools, if you don't have tools that kind of give you a really accurate effort, just having an accurate-ish guess is better than nothing. And like we said, MyFitnessPal is a great tool. There's other great little free exercise apps where you put in how much training you did and it gives you an estimate on how much you burnt. And this is how we're kind of projecting our base numbers to work off.
And as we said, the science isn't exact as well. So there has to be a trial and error phase. Like once we've got these kind of numbers built up, we then have to have some kind of trackable. And then with that trackable, we can be like, oh, actually over 2 weeks, I'm not feeling like we've got to wait 2 to 3 weeks to actually see a change. So after 2 to 3 weeks, I'm like, actually, I feel like I've actually put on a little bit of weight or I've maintained, or well, we need to make adjustments. We actually need to maybe drop that calorie deficit a little bit lower to see adjustments happen.
Cool. So what we go into,
or the deficit?
Well, how many calories to strip off?
Well, yeah. So once you've got that kind of number, you're going to take like a 0.5 to a 1% drop. Yeah. So you can kind of take a small drop for that number at first. Like normally it's going to be somewhere between like 500 to 1,000 calories a day. And that's it's gonna depend on your. Oh, sorry, my mistake. It's actually gonna be a 0.5 to 1% body weight drop per week that you're gonna want. You're gonna want like a 500 to 1,000 kilo drop. And just bear in mind, if this is your first time working on fat loss, you're gonna probably want to go on the lower end of things. Make it something that's a little bit more sustainable, and then slowly creep that up as you go.
There's a fun saying, like, if you're a successful dieter, it's someone that's dieted and actually had success. So if you're an experienced dieter, it means you've had good success, you got where you wanted to go. And they're the individuals that would be more likely to take that high percent number. If it's first time dieting or you haven't had the greatest amount of success, start low, build up. Don't go for top tier straight away. And it's so tempting, right? You start plugging in your numbers and you're like, oh, I could have my goal in 10 weeks if I put everything up to the nth degree. Patience is going to be key with this. Nice and slow, slowly building habits and having things that are sustainable and obtainable. Anything kind of outside of that is shooting yourself in the foot, most likely.
And how often do we find that people get anecdotal kind of like proof from people who actually haven't what you just called a successful dieter? And then what they done, they had a month and they weren't successful, but they were successful for a month. And then they give all this advice to everyone. Well, I did the keto diet. I've lost it for a month. Well, the good question would be like, have you got to where you want to be? And then if you've got to track, kind of guess to see if they're actually being honest with you or not. But if they have actually gone this long journey and they've got exactly where they want to be, then I'd actually might take that information on hand. But most of the time you'll find that it's someone who naturally has already looked really good that we're getting information from, or someone who's giving you that kind of like, I've been doing this for 3 weeks. Well, whoa. Don't take information from someone who's only been doing it for 3 weeks, because even the scales, the trackable things won't show anything after 2 to 3 weeks anyway. You need to wait longer than 3 weeks before you get some decent information to use.
Most definitely. How long should this go for? If you're planning to be in a bit of a deficit, honestly, the plan should be shooting for about somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks. You need time, as James just said, you need time to see those results start to compound and start to take their effect. That first week, you won't see much, but maybe water weight change. Like it's literally not much going to happen. You won't start to see meaningful changes into that 3 to 4 week mark. So be patient with it. And you're aiming each week, like roughly that 0.5 to 0.1% slowly accumulating. And by that 6 to 10 week phase, we're looking ideal, perfect world scenario, maximally effort, about 10% of our body weight being taken off. And that's probably maximal effort. And then it's time to go into a maintenance phase, which we'll talk about in a bit.
We're going to talk about the maintenance phase now. Like, so,
Boom.
well, if we're going to talk about it in a bit, like another interesting thing to talk about there is when we're looking at that calorie deficit, right? Like the calorie deficit. Well, this is again not exact science, but a half half a kilo of tissue is equal to 3,500 calories. So if you are looking at the scales as your measurement tool, and you kind of do have a number, which I don't always like, I wouldn't suggest is the best way to go about it, but you do have a number, for example, well, then you can do the maths and you can be like, okay, well, I want to lose half a kilo a week, which is actually quite a good like amount to lose depending on your weight. Like I just mentioned, it's 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week is a good way to go. And you can go higher and you can go lower than these numbers. You can do less than 6 weeks and you can do more than 12 weeks. But it's going to be dependent on the person and kind of your skill level. And these are good recommendations to start off with. But back on track with that, well, if half a kilo of muscle is 3,500 calories, then if I have a 500 calorie deficit a day, well, that would equal 3,500 calories over 7 days. And then over 7 days, that would be that half a kilo loss. So this kind of things to bear in mind when you're kind of planning out like like all these little bits of information can be super useful because you'd be like, okay, well, this is actually good information to be like, okay, now I can plan around that.
Really want to make a key point here. So when we're in that deficit, we don't want to keep stripping away from food. And the primary effort doesn't want to be stripping away from food. How we get in that deficit, the idea of it is to hopefully be through exercise, through that neat movement. So just getting that extra incidental movement in, and then intentional movement. They're our main two drivers to be in that deficit. Where food is applicable, we want to try and get all the food in we can and create that deficit through exercise and movement. That's key. So if we don't have any meaningful changes through our diet for about 2 to 3 weeks, we might be looking to increase that deficit slightly. And it might be like 200-300 calories maximally. And that again, we want to try and influence through exercise. And if we can't get additionally through exercise, the first place we're probably going to look at is stripping through fats. Fats is probably the first thing we're going to look at our calories because one gram of fats is about 9 calories, so it's a fair bit. And our body only needs like 60, I think, of like 80 grams of calories to do all its hormonal functions. So first place we're going to rip. That you're going to start to take away from that. And the last place you'll look to probably rip from, the next place you'll probably look to rip from is from carbohydrates. Probably the next most important. And protein, we're not going to touch it. So they're probably the tools we're looking at. Can we get our NEAT up? Can we get our intentional movement up? They're the first two. Okay, my third strategy is going to I can start to take from fats, and then I can take from carbohydrates where needed.
Yeah, so that's such good information. And when we look at this, and when we actually, you've got to kind of decide also where you're going to rip it from. Are you going to rip it from are you going to take the calories from the food, or are you going to get more energy expenditure through the exercise? Because people go too far on the extremes on this one. And for example, like after I actually train a certain amount into a calorie deficit, your body knows, right? If you're trying to train into a calorie deficit too hard, well, your body will actually stop you involuntarily from doing more exercise, and you actually start feeling really tired. You actually might experience pain in the feet from walking too much. You actually might experience pain in the shoulders or feel lethargic and tight because the body is actually like starting to like understand that that we don't have the calories in reserve for this, so we want to lie you down and relax you. And that's something to think about, because if you are doing a certain amount of exercise, you're like, oh, well, I can't add any more exercise. Well, no longer get it from your exercise and start getting it from food. And then on the counterpoint of that is quite often you'll find people who be like, actually, I don't have that much time to do any more exercise throughout the day. Well, you might look at your diet, you might go, actually, I'm really satisfied with my diet at the moment. So I could actually lose 100 or 200 calories from that diet, like Mitch said, and you're going to have that kind of hierarchy of where you're going to take it from, the fats, the carbs, or but not the proteins. And then you might be like, actually, I could take 100. So it's going to be very dependent on the individual where they should be taking the calories from. But exactly, they can come from both directions. If you know you need a bigger deficit, then you can steal where is necessary.
I'm going to backpedal just a little bit. So we've talked about calories and macros. Honestly, even one step back from that, to make meaningful changes is just is looking at what is good food and what is bad food. Sometimes it's that basic. Sometimes we don't even have to dive hard into calories or hard into macros, and it can be like, all right, this pizza, I know it's worth a few calories. Maybe I could substitute rather the whole pizza for half the pizza and maybe some good salad on the side or some fruit and veggies. And sometimes those little small changes, especially if you've maybe never dieted or you may weigh a bit of a higher weight and you need to start making those changes, those little tiny changes are sometimes just enough to get that snowball effect and get things started. You don't have to do any of these systems and just make intuitive, smart, healthy decisions. Take time. Sorry, I'll give you a few ones straight away. Take time with your meal, no matter what it is. Slowly eat it, and sometimes that's enough to take time with your meal for the brain to go, "Hey, I'm full. Enough of this. Put the rest for later's, for leftovers or turf it or whatever it happens to be." Take time with your meal. Make smart decisions with what is healthy and what isn't, and most of us know what that is. If I hold up a pizza versus like a steak and veggies, like you know which one's going to be more nutritious, right? Making more of those smart choices throughout your week and making sure you don't overly excessively binge in any portions. We know these are the smart little tools for success, and no calorie counting has been done, and we can still get some beautiful benefit to our body.
I think we should have started with that a little bit earlier. I think that's an amazing
Mm,
point, Mitch. Um, while as evidence based, when they have done studies on people following this kind of intuitive eating and this meal planning does kind of have more success. But we can understand why, right? Because actually, the intuitive eating is going to actually have more habit change, right? At first, you're going to have to slowly get into that kind of like understanding, and you're going to have to make better choices. Whereas, like Mitch said, like satiety and adherence are so similar, right? Like if I need to adhere to something, well, I want to make sure that I'm not getting super hungry. And well, if I'm going to do this more of an intuitive eating, I'm not going to track my macros and stuff like that. Like that's it. Like eat slower, right? Eating slower will allow the food to get into your bowels. So then, what actually happens is you actually are full earlier, and you will stop eating sooner. It can be as simple as like eat more protein. Well, we know that protein actually satiates you like really, really well, and like so, not eating enough protein is going to make you more hungry. We know that fast food is dense, yeah, super dense, like we discussed at the beginning, super dense in calories. So we want to kind of cut that out, and then we can look at foods like, for example, like having a. I think this is a good trick, like having mince versus having steak. Well, mince, I can eat mince. I use mince when I want to bulk and I want to put muscle on because I can just shove it down my throat, right? But if I'm eating a steak, it takes longer. I have to cut it. Like it takes longer. I have to chew it. Like, and as I chew, I get all these extra enzymes from my mouth into my gut, and it's going to actually make me fuller faster. Another little one is like actually it's kind of our environment that we live in these days. It's very common that people are going to have a cold like fizzy drink with their meal. Well, actually, what that does is actually kind of down regulates the nerves in the gut for feeling full because it's cold and desensitizes them. So then what actually happens is I feel like I can eat more and I can eat more and I can eat more. Not even to say that like drinking calories can be like a real high intense calorie amount of like you look at fizzy drinks, they're like 400 calories. Well, that's most people's meal. You put that on a meal, then you just doubled your meal. So there's all these other ways. It's like things like salads, like they are so like low in calories and you can just eat as much of them as possible, but they will fill you up if you eat more of it. Like vegetables, low in calories, very high in nutrients, like you can't really go wrong. So when you are looking at your plate, like as Mitch said as well, like we intuitively normally know what is good for us, right? We have been told so much. It's just the doing that is really, really hard. And that sometimes is why this kind of planned out process can be the better alternative. But they're both extremely good, and you've got to kind of choose which path you want to take.
to keep banging on that same drum that James was talking about, you have option A that might be some we'll classify as junk food, tastes really good to the mouth, but is high calories, low nutritional input, versus let's say healthy option on the right. Let's use again the same example of a pizza. I've got a pizza on my left, and I say you can eat the whole pizza or you can eat 6 apples. I'll smash that whole pizza, man. I know I'm a dirty bastard. If I'm feeling hungry, I can smash a pizza easily. I can't get through 5 or 6 apples. I'm done by like apple two. I'm full. That's satiety level's done. I feel like I can't take any more in. Like, and the calorie input to those two are massive. Healthy food is just generally more dense nutritionally and is going to help out with the satiety levels. Junk food, man, it is amazing the damage you can do in a short window. And we've all been there, man. We've all been hungry. We've all raided the bloody cupboard. We've done some damage in very minimal time. So creating the opportunity environments at home where you have those healthier options more available and those junk foods kind of hidden and harder to access is going to set yourself up for success. I think maybe something we'll start talking about is more tools for success with dieting and being in a calorie deficit.
Yeah, well, once you've got them numbers and you've planned it out, then you want to make sure, like Mitch says, you want to kind of plan the environment around yourself. And like going to the shops hungry can be your biggest fault. Like if you are going to do your weekly shop, if you go to that shop hungry, and again, we talk about adherence. Well, we talk about kind of like um intermittent fasting, for example, is why lots of people fail intermittent fasting is because they go around food while they are in this state of being extremely hungry. And ideally, what we want to see is people kind of eating at the same kind of times. We are habitual. We just did a podcast on habits, right? We are habitual people, so it actually helps us. And there's really good evidence for health benefits as well that we, if we eat at the same times throughout the day. And then we talked about sleep as well. Well, that's going to help your sleep because you're going to get into this routine of eating at the same times, going to sleep at the same time. So these things are really important. And then when you're going to the shops, you're normally not going to make stupid mistakes. And then say, for example, you do make some mistakes or you treat yourself to a few foods, where you put them in your house is going to be important as well. If they're plain inside, then it's going to be more likely that you eat them. I just think the best thing to do is hide them to the side and getting them out of your eyesight, or just chuck them in the bin sometimes.
I've had moments where I've had to ask my wife to hide food. I'm like, I know if I get home, I'm starving at this point, and I will seek and I will destroy. My wife kind of makes one level difficulty. I get lazy and I default to a healthier option. Sorry, that's a sad admission. So, okay, so
off the topic of that, sorry, just off the topic of that, just no, my willpower is incredible. I don't crave lots of the stuff. Like I don't crave. I'm really lucky to not crave chocolate, right? I'm really lucky, but I do crave like burgers and pizzas and like stuff like that. But chocolate isn't one for me, and obviously burgers and pizzas are harder to attain than chocolate bars. So I kind of feel a little bit blessed for that one.
Lucky man,
So rich.
Lucky man.
Off the topic of that is once you have done your food shop, food prepping. So this can be extremely useful, again, for them same reasons. Like when you are hungry, sometimes the last thing you want to do is cook food. So if you have food ready for you, prepped from a few days before, then you can just grab that out, microwave it, do whatever you want with it, and then eat it, right? So this is an extremely useful tool, and prepping can be extremely hard. But there is some really simple ways to do it. And I think these days, like you can get so much information on the internet, good information about how to do some decent, easy preps.
Yeah. And again, there's going to be like things that are smash the protein in everything we're prepping. We've got a good, healthy source of carbs, and we've got some fruit and veggies in there, a bit of color. And to have these things easy, accessible, like you said, man, like when you get that hunger demons talking to you and you don't have 15 minutes to wait. You got to chuck it in the microwave 2 minutes and you're done. You're back to being a normal human being. Those cravings absolutely disappear. And having something prepped and like in your bag is another hot tip. So if you're getting like that kind of 3:30itis, your body's getting hungry, you need something, having something in your bag that's quickly accessible, it doesn't have to be a prepped meal. It can be like a protein bar. It can be a bit of fruit, whatever it happens to be. And having that quick accessible option always on hand in your bag, handbag, whatever it happens to be, just helps that bad choice before it even starts to become an option. You just squash that already. So kind of knowing yourself and having some options on hand is a massive little tip for success.
And when you do make a mistake, well, don't dwell yet and get back into it straight away. So I feel like the biggest issue that we find as people do is they make that mistake and then they go into this kind of spiral of hating on themselves, and then they make another mistake, another mistake, and another mistake. Well, that's definitely 3 mistakes versus 1 mistake. Well, I'd take 1 mistake any time of the day to try and get back on that horse as quickly as possible. Don't dwell on it. Don't worry about it too much. Well, you can even maybe add a little bit of exercise to it, but I don't think that's always the best way. I think the best way to do it is just be like, hey, that's done, that's happened. Why did I do that? And how can I not do that again?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's also, on top of that, there is cheat meals and there is things we call refeeds. Well, refeed can be a planned day where you either eat at maintenance or you eat at a surplus, right? So it just gives you a day where you can actually control your diet and kind of take away all them hunger pangs as much as possible. Then we have cheat meals. I think cheat meal is actually a unplanned like cheat, and the issue with that is actually what happens is people just go absolutely crazy. Say for example, I am having a 5-calorie a day deficit equaling 3,500. We just discussed how dense fast food can be. Well, if you have a cheat meal, it can be quite easy to ruin all the hard work you've done throughout the week. Then another week of hard work, and before you know it, you're just actually dieting for no reason whatsoever, and that is not a happy life to live, right? We want to diet, we want to lose that fat, and then we want to live our lives again, go into a maintenance phase or eat normally again, at our new metabolic rate so we can enjoy our lives, right? And not to say that you can't enjoy your life as much as possible in this kind of fat loss routine, but it isn't the most enjoyable. Let's be honest.
We've touched on the word maintenance phase a couple of times, so we'll dive into that a little bit. So, like we said, when you've been in a deficit for a bit and you've been stripping off that bit of that body fat bit by bit by bit, and you've had some success, yay, good job. But once we've it's either A, when I'm like, I can't do this anymore, like I'm mentally fatigued, I'm physically fatigued. Cool, let's stop. Let's just go back to a bit of normality. Give our body some time to adjust. Or if you've been dieting for about up to 12 weeks, it's probably time just to take a bit, because like dieting stress on the system, right? The body's just working a little bit harder than what it needs to be to kind of go, fat, get off me. So after about 12 weeks, it might be time to go, hey, let's go into a maintenance. And maintenance where we're going to have those extra calories. That deficit, those extra calories we've been ripping out, we're back in our diet. We're eating those. Yay. We're upping our protein, carbs, and fat intake yet again. So this is just like, I'm not really hitting above it. I'm not really hitting below it. I'm just hitting what my body needs and wants.
Yeah, you kind of give yourself a percentage, like you can go up about like a kilo and a bit because there's going to be body fluctuations anyway. So you can go up about a kilo and a bit, down a kilo a bit, kind of depending on your starting body weight anyway. But the idea is like, so kind of like a percent of your body weight would be fine to fluctuate up and down with. But the idea is that you don't want to put any extra weight on. And this maintenance phase is going to last 2/3 or longer of your actually fat loss phase. So say for example, your fat loss phase was, I'm gonna have to do some maths off the top of my head, I'm gonna hate this. Say for example, your fat loss phase was 6 weeks. Yeah, well, you're gonna spend 4 to 6 weeks in your maintenance phase. And this is the most powerful weapon that exists to everyone. This is the thing that people don't do because it's the kind of the thing that sets your body up for like results, but you don't see anything from it. So it's very much the epitome of delayed gratitude. And then the idea is that in this period of time, you pretty won't feel hunger as well. So next time you do go, we call it resensitization. You've resensitized yourself to a calorie deficit again. So the next time round, you can actually have nearly the same calorie deficit can reap good rewards. But maybe even if you're doing well, if you have lost some fat, that's a reason why you're going to actually have to drop your calories lower to lose more, because now your basal metabolic rate is a little bit lower, but also because your allostasis, your body, the homeostasis of your body has changed, and you actually require less energy, and or well, you're actually going to maintain, you're going to set your new allostasis. So you're going to set a new set point for your body.
Cool. That deficit can go anywhere from like, I don't know, 6 to 12 weeks. My three things if I'm gonna stop are gonna be A, like I just can't do it. I'm fatigued mentally, physically, and I need a break. Happy days. If I've dropped about 10% of my starting body weight, that's probably time where you need to resensitize. And three is when you reach that time where it's been about 12 weeks. And then they're all the keys to go, hey, it's time to start a maintenance phase. How long should a maintenance phase last? James gave some good information there. I'll give you one extra. It's whenever you're mentally ready to. So you want to wait those couple of weeks, but if you do not want to diet, you don't have to. You can just stay longer in a maintenance phase for a month, for half a year, for a year if you want to, as long as you need until you're ready to do the next push. And again, then we're going to go for another 6 to 12 weeks, and we might shoot for 10% again. Know that when we go for that second push, it's going to be harder because we are less percent than what we started. We're going to be harder to shift those kilos. We will get less results in that second attempt. So be kind and patient with yourself when you shoot with those further attempts with deficits.
Yeah, but as you get towards your goal as well, that's going to be a continuous process. So you're going to go kind of through that fat loss phase, then you're going to go into maintenance. Like Mitch said, when you're ready, you'll go back into a fat loss and then back into a maintenance, and you do that again until you reach your results. The idea is while the maintenance phase should be as long as can be as long as you want really, but the standard would be to go 2/3 to the same time. You don't want to carry on a deficit phase. Actually, there's some really good information on having too long a deficit phase and when it will actually cause issues. Well, you could actually say that it's roughly, I've got a quick note here. Health risks at larger than 2% weight loss per week. Yeah, so anything underneath that is fine. And then after more than 16 weeks deficit at weights for men below 5 and women below 15. So you actually, after 16 weeks of deficit, it's too long to deficit. And that's where you hear of these kind of like people actually saying that my metabolism is messed up and crashed, and that can happen from a 16 weeks deficit. It's where your body actually starts fearing that when it's going to get food in again, and your hormone systems and everything can drop down a lot. The other times to probably stop the deficit is for when men get below 5, like we discussed earlier, and when women get below 15, unless you are a professional bodybuilder who is going on show, where you might just take it to the extremes.
Another thing with your targets. So if we do have like a target in mind, I kind of want to overshoot the target. James mentioned earlier, when we go back into a maintenance, it is likely that we might go a kilo or two back up and the body will resensitize to that weight. So if I do have a target in mind, I will overshoot it a little bit with my deficit target, because then when I go into my maintenance, I'm like, oh, I'm done dieting now. I'm happy with what's going on and where I am. I will bounce back up a little bit. So it is something to know with whatever your targets are. You want to slightly overshoot because you will rebound back a little bit. So just food for thought, literally, for the back of your head with you and your targets.
And talking about targets, then we can't really talk about targets without talking about tracking. And as we discussed earlier, well, first of all, what is your goal? And when we talk about a goal, we're also going to have to talk about how we're going to track that goal, how we're going to know that we're making progress. And there is different ways of tracking that goal, right? So you have things like you have your DEXA scans, which are kind of like an X-ray scan on your body, which then breaks up the composition of your body. How much are you muscle? How much are you fat? How much water are you? The shape of your skeleton, your bone density, and all these amazing things. It's a very thorough scan, and it actually can be very accurate. There is room for error on it, but they're probably the most accurate test there is. We have obviously body weight measurements, but we've discussed this a few times and in other podcasts that some issues with the body weight measurements could be that you fluctuate. You eat a more salty food. You're holding onto more water. Your hormones are changing because maybe you may be female or male, but if you're female, then what you might have happened, you might be that time of the period when you're weighing a little bit more. We have body measurements, which I like. I think it's a good one to add to it, especially when you're going for aesthetic goals as well. But I think body weight is a good one as well, as long as you're not too fixated on the number. You've got body measurements where you can do a navel, you can do a thigh, you can do an arm, you can do a chest measurement. We have bioelectric impedance. So these are the ones where you stand on and you hold your hand on and you maybe have your feet on. Sometimes it's just feet. And what they do is they send a current through your body that comes back at a certain speed. And because the electricity will run slower through muscle, what we find is that actually it can kind of then approximate your body fat. But these have like a 10%, it can be up to 10% wrong by how much water you have. Caliper tests, which is when you get someone to like pinch your skin and measure the fat on top of the subcutaneous fat on top of your muscles. Well, all these things can actually be extremely useful, even though they vary in their kind of like accuracy, because we can track trends. So as long as you kind of continuously track it down, like if you weigh your body weight, I normally recommend like 3 to 4 times a week. I know it sounds a lot at the same time, after the same kind of bowel movements, after the same kind of meals, or before, and then you kind of track it. And the same thing with all of these, you want to make sure that it's done on a consistent time frame, as consistently as possible, so you can slowly track your progress and make changes before it's too late, kind of thing.
Give yourself time to get benefits, to get your benefits. It won't come immediately, it will compound and it will slowly start to manifest and get you where you need to go. Talk about some things that can shoot yourself in the foot with. One of the biggest and most common ones is alcohol consumption. It is very high calories for not much benefit whatsoever. Actually takes away from a lot of beautiful benefits in your body. So again, on the drink is honestly, if you're really serious and you want to buckle down, you're going to probably limit those opportunities where you can, smash a few drinks. So you might have to be tough with yourself and restrict yourself out for outings. And if you do it, you've got to kind of make some smart choices out there. So what is it? One gram, nine calories is it?
7 calories.
7. There
gram.
it is.
Yeah, so every gram of alcohol is 7 calories, and whereas like proteins and carbohydrates are 4, and fats, like Mitch said earlier, was 9s. Well, you actually get a lot of benefit from them other ones, whereas alcohol has no positive effects on weight loss. Yeah, maybe it's a social thing, maybe it can help your mood, that's cool, but fat loss is actually really useless, and if anything, it will also disrupt your hormones and help you lose muscle, while it doesn't help you lose fat. Interesting thing about when I'm drinking is if I'm drinking and eating, my body will prioritize the breakdown of alcohol for energy so that it can get the toxins out of the body as fast as possible. While that's happening, your liver can no longer break down sugars and fats to it and as efficiently as normal, and you will store that. So you can get fat from drinking alcohol and it being a calorie surplus, but you can also get fat from drinking alcohol because you can no longer break down fat and you will store more fat.
Get on the fake beers. It's what we've adapted to.
I love it. I love the non-alcoholic pale ales and stuff like that these days.
No one pulls you up. It looks like the exact same thing.
Exactly. It smells like the same thing. You still get beer breath.
In disguise, baby. But I like smart things like that. You know, take the piss a little bit, but like it's smart things like that are the options you got to do, right? Because as we said, if you can do a lot of damage in a small amount of time, 2-3 hours on the piss, you sink a few things down. You've accumulated quite a few thousand worth of calories, and that is a fair bit to work off, and a lot of good habits you have to do afterwards to outdo that, to compound up and to beat that damage of the day or night. All right, what are other big detriments to be looking out for?
We could either discuss the pyramid, or we could or go into So the pyramid, then
we'll come back when we talk training.
Yeah, cool. So the hierarchy of this nutrition, as we have mostly only spoken about a couple of things, these are the top of the totem pole. Is that the expression? We have energy balance, which is that calories in, calories out. That is the most important of all the things. We've discussed that very thoroughly. We have macronutrients. That's the breakdown and the amount of fat, protein, and carbohydrates you have in. You have micronutrients, which also includes hydration. Micronutrients are your vitamins and minerals that you get from food. And like we discussed, like the more healthy meals, like the less fast food, is going to be more micronutrient dense most of the time. Timing, that's actually a very important thing. This can be extremely help in building a habit. It can also help in adherence. Yeah, but then it can also help in not losing muscle mass by not allowing yourself too long to be catabolic and feeding the muscles, especially before and after trainings. And then we have supplements. Well, we've discussed what kind of supplements we like, and I think that the industry for fat burning is probably the worst part of the supplement industry. I would never normally recommend any fat burner of what, because I think most of them are absolutely useless. And if they do help, they're going to help 0.2, 0.001%.
You're literally pissing your money away.
Yep. And then normally they're just like extremely highly caffeinated as well, because caffeine can have effects on increasing your basal metabolic rate. And what we actually end up doing is stressing ourselves out like that. So it can
ruining your sleep.
Yep, and it can help us break down more muscle mass. Apart from that, we have nutrition timing, and we also have one thing I mentioned with nutrition, didn't mention nutrition time, is we have the frequency. I kind of did touch on that, but we want to make sure that we're not eating too far away from each other. Obviously, again, intermittent fasting is a kind of the opposite to that, but I would recommend most people eat regularly to curve cravings.
Definitely. So just to recap, so like the image we're looking at here, like I think we all remember the nutrition table where like sweets are at the top and at the bottom is the fruit and veg. And what we just explained is that pyramid is, again, that big base, everything that's built off is just being in a calorie deficit if we want to lose weight. That affects like majority of things. If that isn't in play, we're not really going to win here. Again, to recap, James, very quickly, that energy balance being a deficit. The next thing up on that pyramid, the macronutrients, all right? As we said, we've got to get that protein in. That frequency of that protein is very important because we're never stripping from it. And then the fats and the carbs. Carbs can be a powerful tool. If we've got a big training event or something coming up, we need to upregulate carbs prior to a meal. It's going to help us have energy for the session. If we want to recover from that training session, we're going to need carbs after it as well. That's going to help out the process. So the type of having just the macronutrients in your day, we can also play around when we have them. Micronutrients, all the small healthy stuff that comes with the green and the colorful stuff that we have throughout our day, that's going to add a massive benefit. Trying to eat the rainbow every couple of days. Nutrient timing, James already said that, just to recap. And then supplements, just get some protein, casein, creatine, that's it.
Yep, and especially for, again, we've discussed this a few times, super important when it comes to maintaining muscle mass, things like your leucine, your creatine, which you don't get in very many vegetarian diets. So they can be extremely helpful. If there is a time for supplements, I'd say it's when you're on restricted dieting, and you might need to just fit in some gaps. Yep.
It's been a bit, but let's circle back to this. So we talked about periodizing nutrition, but when it comes to training as well, we can match our nutrition to match our training protocol. And what we do at Benchmark, we kind of give you guys advance notice to what's happening. So if you're a switched on individual, you can look for opportunities where it might be a nice opportunity to work on decreasing body fat, and periods when to increase muscle mass, and then times for maintenance as well. So in times where we are doing higher outputs, We've got maybe a bit of cardio going on. We're upping up the reps, and the outputs are less strength focused and more aerobically driven. It's going to be a great time to start working in a deficit. And when times change, when we're looking at more strength feats and we're looking at performance based efforts, I don't really want to be in a deficit. And this is a good argument again for intermittent fasting. I won't go too crazy in this, but if we don't have food in the system, it's harder to perform with a higher output. So when we're looking to be strong and put muscle in the body, man, we need to be in a surplus. We need calories in our system. If I want to be my best and get the best out of my training, I need some, like we just talked a little bit about, I need some carbs and protein prior and a bit afterwards. And I want to be in that maintenance, or even better if I'm in a surplus, if I'm trying to put on some muscle mass. And if I'm in that last phase of that cycle, this is just using the cycles that we use here, and I'm in that strength and power phase, I can be in a maintenance through that to get good performance, or I can still be in a surplus for that to get even a greater performance. So thinking what you're doing with your training to how we match our nutrition with training can be powerful. That's some big brain stuff. And if you can organize that, I guarantee your results and your success is increased massively.
I think, yeah, exactly. I think the important things to bear in mind is that when you are in a fat loss stage, then you probably want to get most of your extra energy expenditure through NEAT. Well, so the reason for that is because NEAT is the other 20 hours, 23 hours of the day, and you're pretty exercising for 1 hour. Well, NEAT actually can build up a much more of a calorie the deficit than an actual an hour of exercise. Like the most intense hour of exercise is going to vary by only a small percent to the lowest moderate form of exercise in that hour. But then if I'm continuously doing more stuff throughout the day, I'm walking more, but that's going to actually benefit to that calorie deficit much more. Actually adding on the NEAT, because that sums up, that's like 23 times 4 is going to be such a higher number than a slightly fractional change in how hard you trained in that hour. Yeah, so it's kind of wide, like Mitch might mention, that we actually aerobic conditioning, which isn't that high intensity, where it's not just focused about burning calories. It's going to be the better solution when you are on that kind of fat loss diet. As well as that, one of the issues with fat loss diet is your body will be in a calorie deficit. Therefore, you will be what we call catabolic. Therefore, your body will want to break down muscle at some stage for energy. This is not something that you need to worry about so much when you are maybe even heavier and quite overweight, because what's going to happen is you're going to hold on to muscle mass because your body's going to break down the fat and it's going to have extra stores. It won't feel like it needs to break down as much muscle. For those leaner of you, that's where it becomes a bigger issue. The issue with actually training in a calorie deficit is that actually being catabolic, you need to actually do more volume of strength than previously to maintain muscle. And that's the hard thing, right? It's like if when I'm in a calorie surplus, to gain muscle, I actually don't need to train that much, right, to grow it. But when I'm in a calorie deficit, I actually have to increase the volume of my work, yeah, to get the same effect, which is really, really tough, right? Because you know that the energy levels do drop, yeah, and we probably don't want to train quite as hard. So you got to make sure you are fueling yourself with carbs and you are fueling yourselves around training session, because you still have to work. You actually have to work harder when you're in a fat loss with strength. So that you can look at it like at the 2 points of things. You have your 3 points. You have your NEAT. You have outside of training, and I would say one of the best things you can do is they actually make sure you're doing lots of light intensity exercise. We call it light intensity steady states, LIST for short, while you're on a calorie deficit. And then we have what you're doing in the gym. I would just work on building muscle in the gym as much as possible, maybe a little bit of aerobic work, but doing higher intensity stuff is not going to change how many calories you burn by a big deal, right? And if anything, it will just make you tighter and you won't be able to build up as much NEAT throughout the day because your body will want to just lie down. And then when it comes to strength training, you're going to have to make sure you just do the work. You've got to get more work in than usual, which is kind of like it's not intuitive, that is it? It's like you think that, but hold on to muscle while you drop fat is super important.
It's one of those fallacies you just said, James. Is so great, right? Like, how many individuals you come in here and be like, "Oh, is this training good for weight loss?" Yes, you need to put muscle on your frame. Like this, like I must do high intensity to burn fat is ridiculous. You need to be in a calorie deficit.
Yeah,
You need to maintain that muscle as best you can.
if you think that 1 hour of the day is what's going to make the difference, well, I could program the harder session for you and you burn 500, 600 calories. Then I could program a moderate session for you where you're going to burn 400, 500. Yeah, well, you can do much more work. You can get much more of a calorie deficit in the other hours of the day, like walking to the car, like walking to the train, like get up, walk your dog, do whatever, play with your kids, like all that stuff, garden, like do the house chores. that's actually going to build up a way higher calorie deficit. And one of the issues with high intensity training while you're in a calorie deficit is this is where you'll want to probably eat way more food afterwards. And also your body knows, so your body will be like, hey, you've just worked really, really hard and we've worked so hard that we've created so much damage in the body that now we have to repair this. The body will want to lie down for longer. Yeah, and then you can imagine how that lowers your NEAT massively, which over the course of the day actually drops your calorie outputs. And you'll also want to binge on foods for energy.
Um, I was just having a thought in the head. I was just trying to manifest the last bit. I was hoping that you'd go for a little bit longer. I was like, come on, thought, manifest.
Have you got it?
Oh, we'll see. I'll wing it. When it comes into, like, I want to just touch quickly on intermittent fasting and having blocks of periods where we do not eat is going to our society level is so much higher afterwards. And I'm losing it. I don't have it. I'm tapping out on that one.
So let's just talk about that quickly. Like we got the intermittent fasting and having like, especially when are you intermittent fasting? When are you taking your break? Is it around training? Because I'd say that was probably one of the worst things you could do. And we have this one. What a good one with that is fasted cardio in the morning. Like that's a big one that a lot of people do. Well, the evidence shows there is a smallest possible fraction of extra fat loss from fasted cardio. So it can happen. It does happen. You burn a little bit more, but the fraction is so tiny. Well, imagine if you fueled up, and you're going to have that meal afterwards anyway. Imagine if you fueled up beforehand. Well, the amount of output you can put into that session will make the bigger difference than actually the fasted cardio.
And when you're fasted too, man, it's like things aren't firing the best they can. So if you're fasting up until like midday or 1 o'clock or something, dude, you're going to be not the best version of yourself when you're at work. Those carbs are awesome to get the brain ticking. And all those other extra calories are going to get your systems working at their higher potential. If you've got nothing in the system for quite a substantial amount of time, you're going to be more brain foggy and you won't make the best decisions that you can at work, or more likely not to make the greatest decisions possible.
Yeah, one of the reasons that people talk so highly of intermittent fasting, and you'll hear it, they'll be like, oh, my brain was so clear. I've never been so clear. Well, do you know what makes you super clear? Stress. And actually the evidence points that the reason for intermittent fasting being so good for mental clarity is because it stresses you so hard. And it's kind of like that kind of fight and flight when you are like, okay, I have tunnel vision. I can concentrate on one thing really well right now. And you'll find that most of the evidence behind it points at that. So you're actually not, and then we talk about stress and we talk about how catabolic stress is. Well, the issue with stress being catabolic, and we talk how we want to be catabolic, but we want to be catabolic and break down fat tissue. We want to maintain muscle tissue, and being overly stressed will help you break down muscle tissue. So that's the reason why we discussed that earlier. Stress and sleep is very important.
You got extras you want to dive into, bro?
Oh, I feel like
there's a lot in this.
I feel like we got like so much done, and I honestly don't think I have anything else to say. I think there's.
Let us do an overview.
But one other quick thing is gut health, and then what we did briefly mention this is when things like carbohydrates can be super important, and we do have different types of carbohydrates. We have what we call like these complex and simplex carbohydrates. Well, lots of these complex carbohydrates have really good fibers in them, and these fibers fuel the kind of the microbiome of your gut. And when we're talking about calories, there is a lot, and this is kind of like a bit of a counter argument, and it's off the evidence-based side of things, a little bit more woo-woo, but there is some good emergent evidence on it, is when we talk about calories, well, the food that goes in my mouth doesn't necessarily get turned into fat, protein for muscle, and so on. And the reason for that is because your gut has to do the job. That's the kind of the line of defense, right? Things come into your gut, then your gut has to break that food down, and then your gut has to then use that food as efficiently as possible. Well, I think gut health is a super important thing. And I think to chase better gut health with things like probiotics, prebiotics, and other kind of like enzymes is super important as well. And there's so much evidence on how useful probiotics can be, because the better your gut is functioning, the easier this process can be, right? Not that I think you can blame this stuff on gut health too much, but I definitely think it can be a little bit of a advantage if you're working on your gut health. I'd say if you're going to say supplements, I'd say a probiotic, a prebiotic is better than your average nitro oxide fat burner kind of thing that you see, nitro ball.
There's some fucking great ads for it. Like, I'm impressed with the marketing behind it, to be honest. The fat burners.
Oh yeah, sometimes it makes you want to buy it.
Yeah. I'm like, I know it's shit, but that was great.
Sold. Give me take my card.
Take my money. Do a bit of an overview. So our intent is to drop some body fat. All right. So What are we doing first? First, we're making good decisions. We're not even looking at calories or doing anything of that nature. Or especially if this is your first attempt and you're just really going, okay, I'm not that experienced with this, but I want to start making some changes. What intuitive things can I do? Can I look to have some better food options throughout my day? Can I start to upregulate my protein intake? Because maybe I don't do so much of that at the moment. That's powerful. Can I substitute things, swap things out? Can I spend more time with my meals, slowly eating and listening to my body when it's full and being okay with putting the leftovers away? Making smart choices like that have a massive compound effect. Maybe we need to go a step further. Maybe we need some time to look and track what we're consuming. So this might be just spending some time like throughout the week, just writing down what you have and tracking it through some sort of app that gives you a reflection. Not making any changes yet, just understanding what we consume and where our base level is. Next step after that might be building a plan and seeing how we kind of prep ourselves up, setting up some systems that are going to make us have some success with a deficit approach. This is things like planning our food, looking at what we had, doing those calculations to find out how to be in a deficit and how to kind of sustain it, having good food available around the house and putting the bad stuff away and hiding it, having good systems in play in my bag, at home, food prepped and things of that nature to have success with my deficit. My deficit plan might go for 6 to 12 weeks, and I'm aiming for that anywhere between that 0.5 and 1% of body weight per week. Be kind with yourself for those first couple of weeks and don't expect any major changes for a couple of weeks, right? But they'll start to compound and we'll start to see some meaningful change. After about that 12-week mark, I might be looking to transition into a maintenance phase. And that can be for whatever. But we want to give ourselves at least a couple of weeks where we're increasing our calories and giving our body time to resensitize and adapt to that new body weight. And if we want to do another push, if we feel like there's more work to be done, game on, baby. Let's reset and reload and learn from the past diet effort and make smarter changes for the next attempt.
Yeah, just make sure it's longer than a couple of weeks. Again, like with that, at least two-thirds of the time spent in the calorie deficit.
Like life gets in the way, man. We don't want to be doing these deficit pushes when life is hectic, because that's a stress on top of stress. If it's a perfect world scenario, you're looking for like, things are running pretty smooth at the moment. I'm pretty cool. I know what's happening. Now's the time to make a push. When shit's chaotic and life's crazy, you probably just want to be sitting in maintenance, just doing some smart, sustainable changes at home and only doing those pushes when you know you've got a higher chance of success. Anything else to add, sir?
I don't think so. I think that's fantastic. I think a couple of things to do is like this would be a good podcast to listen alongside with the Muscle Game podcast. And then if you are trying to optimize yourself tons, I'd listen to the sleep podcast as well. And then I'd just go ahead and listen to all the podcasts. Then I'd like, subscribe, and then I'd send it to another friend that needs it because everyone needs this.
I love it. Well done. Well done. Guys, on that note, thank you very much for taking the time to listen. We look forward to chatting you in the next podcast.
Thank you.